I'm absolutely fascinated by this. I've never spoken to anyone about what happened in Northern Ireland who's actually been there. And you, like you said, he did 3 operational tours, and also, like you said, it's not like it used to be, and hopefully that is the way it continues to be. When you go to the first Gulf War, Desert Storm, at this point in time, you've left the regular army, and you're now in a special forces, but you're not in the SAS yet.
No, no. What happened was I put in my paperwork to go to the Special Forces, and just as I was going to go to the Special Forces, I went back to my old unit, and the Gulf War happened. So I was due to go on SES selection, and the first Gulf War started. So at that time, I was a corporal, and I thought, right, I can't leave my men. I'm in charge of this warrior, the equivalent of a Bradley. I've got 10 guys, including myself. They're going to war. I'm not going to go on a special forces course. So I went to war with them. And then when after came back after the first Gulf War, they put me straight onto my platoon sergeant's course. So before going for the SAS, again, I goes, right, I might as well do the sergeant's course because it will give me more experience. So I completed that. And then just as I was going to go for the SAS, we had to go on to a Northern Ireland tour again. But this time I was a sergeant in charge of my platoon. So I thought, I can't go on SAS where my guys are going to Ireland. So I did another tour of Northern Ireland and then went to the SES. So I ended up going in 1994. So because of these operational tours, and I didn't want to miss it, it knocked me back something like 4 years. But I thought to myself then, wow, this is great because at least I'm an experienced infantry sergeant and a mechanized infantry sergeant. I've been 3 tours of operational tours in Northern Ireland. I've done the first Gulf War, the full-on armored infantry attacks. I've seen proper action. So I thought, I'm well experienced. But then you do realize when you go into the SAS, it's just totally different. And what happens in about 18 months, you've already done more than what you would have done in sort of 12 years.
Can you explain to the audience what your role was in the first Gulf War? Because I think people watching this are very aware of what the American operations were, what Americans did in the first Gulf War to push back Iraq, but maybe not nearly as aware of what people in the United Kingdom who were serving, what they did. So you specifically, what was your group's role, your unit's role when the first Gulf War happened?
Yeah, well, as you know, it was, I think, Operation Desert Storm, and it
Right.
was in 1990, 91 it started. But we went across over into Saudi Arabia, first of all, only for a few days, and then went straight into the desert in August. Before, yeah, 1990, the war didn't start till January. So basically, we were just living out in the desert by the side of your armored fighting vehicle. And obviously, these 4 vehicles within a platoon, but you lived for them 10 with 10 guys just all around this vehicle and inside the vehicle. It was like a gypsy's caravan. We had all our food rations. Obviously, it had lots of chemical warfare suits. It had just lots of weapons and ammunition. And our role was basically, we were part of the Desert Rats, the original Desert Rats, and it was the 7th Armored Brigade. So we was an armored infantry battalion. So we'd be working with tanks as well. And our job, it was a mechanized unit, would be coming in. We were going to go straight in when we went into Iraq, and then we meant to go up to into Kuwait, and then up to Baghdad, and that was sort of our job. But then it happened so fast, and then we actually stopped just right on the Basra Road. I can talk about that in more detail if you want. But that was what our unit's role was. So we just was in the desert, and because of that, we got lots and lots of wartime ammunition. So we just constantly, we had something like, what, 6 months, 5.5, 6 months of just building up to training for it, but just living in the desert. So you knew your administration was amazing, and you knew them 10 men. They were like brothers at the end because you knew everything about them. You just always together. But a lot of the training was just could be monotonous and boring because you can imagine they've got divisional commanders and generals. They're just moving big tank units around and brigades. So you'd spend a lot of time just sitting in the wagons doing, 12, 13, 14 hours and then stopping and then digging in and then getting back in the wagon and doing mock attacks. And it was designed to practice all movement and logistics and so on. But then we had obviously lots of ammunition doing live firing and stuff. So it got us really skilled and proficient because you're doing all these live attacks, especially at night time, in armored fighting vehicles where you're jumping out the vehicle and these tanks rolling by you and everything. You know, it's quite confusing and quite loud, and uh, it can be quite scary and that. So we spent a lot of time training, so we was well prepared for when the war actually started. And also we did a lot of cross training with at the time it was the American Marines. So we'd go into their Bradley, train with them, and they would come into our Warrior armor fighting vehicle, and we'd swap rations and all that sort of stuff.
I love that. And I do want to unpack it a little bit more because you said it happened so fast. So when the war actually starts and your unit, you're rolling, like you said, you stop on the road where I assume, nobody pushes the Baghdad ultimately. Was it just because the Iraqi resistance, they were just no match for what the US, the Brits, and the allied forces, the coalition threw at them? Why did they go down so quick, do you think?
Well, what it was the air bombardment was going on for weeks and weeks beforehand, and we didn't think it would happen. You know that we had these little transistor radios. You could hear Saddam Hussein saying this is going to be the mother of all battles, and we was worried because about the chemical threat. And every time they fired a scud and it went over our head towards Israel or anywhere, all the alarms were going. So you never knew whether you're going to get a chemical attack. So that was like quite frustrating and that. But what happened was we was told then we actually dug in. We moved to the area, closer to the border. And this time we just dug in the vehicles and we didn't move for a month. And it was just we could watch the bombardments going off. You could see all the lights of the night time. And I thought there's going to be nothing left here. And then when the war did start, it was just like 4 days, flash to bang. It was seemed to be go over very, very quickly. But during that time, the first couple of contacts we had, the first couple of engagements, we'd go into positions and they were saying, we get orders, right? This is a battalion-sized position, and our company's moving on to this position, and it's been bombarded, but we expect fierce resistance. And then we get there, there'd been literally nothing left. It's just you can imagine, there was just body parts and nothing left, just craters. And then the odd prisoner trying to surrender. But also, one of our units, a company, they were involved in the first armored infantry attack since the Second World War. So they'd been in an attack, and then we had a few casualties. I was part of C Company, and we wanted to get into action because it was like we can't finish this with no action. And then we got told, right, we're going to advance onto this other position. Now, there's several positions before when we said it was going to be resistance. We get there and there was no resistance or little resistance, or they were just wanting to surrender. But this time, I don't know what happened, but this place hadn't been touched, and we was told it was only a company size position. So we was expecting just a few prisoners come out. But when we get to the area, it was a full on battalion size. It was a massive unit. And then what happened was some of them were coming out of the trenches wanting to surrender, but then we started getting incoming as well. So it's hitting your vehicle. And this time we did have action, and unfortunately, one of my good friends, as he was debuzzing, he got hit by an RPG warhead. This was like right in front of us, well, about 50 meters. So we lost a couple of guys out of our group on that attack, and then that really brought it home. And then after that, there was a few skirmishes, but mainly they wanted to surrender. But little groups were just trying to put up a fight. I don't know why, because we was far superior, especially our weapons and everything, and our tanks. So it was just really weird. Sometimes you're watching a tank, one of our tanks, fire at a dug-in Iraqi tank, hit it, and then another one of our tanks would fire another round at it, hit it. And these were just T-54s and very old Russian Soviet tanks. There was no match for us. And I'll tell you a funny joke. Well, not a joke, a funny story. We got some of these prisoners, and these Iraqi prisoners, and this one guy, he had his green top on, his little water bottle, his AK, but we took that off him, obviously, and an helmet, a steel helmet, and a gas mask, and that's what he had. But he also had blue jeans. And then when we stopped it, and he was talking in a broad American accent. I can't believe it. I'm like, what's this? What's happened to you? And what happened was, the story was, he went across there. before the war visiting relatives because he was Iraqi, but therefore half Iraqi. And while he was across there, all the tensions happened, and then suddenly they weren't allowing him back, and he was conscripted. He was there, and he was on the front line, and didn't want to be there. You know, and they had really young kids there, old people. But yeah, that was amazing.
Oh, I can't imagine what that would be like to hear a guy with an American accent surrendering to your troops. That must have been confusing as all hell. That's crazy that
Yeah,
happened.
obviously he was so relieved because he just got sent to. That's it. You are now conscripted. Here's your weapon. Here's your magazine of about 30 rounds. And then he's found himself on the front lines. Yeah, it's cannon fodder. So unfortunately, I felt sorry for most of the Iraqis there because they just didn't want to be there. And I think the ones who were firing were just firing out of sheer. Uh, I don't believe they wanted to put up a fight. I just thought they were just firing out of not frustration about what they've been told by Saddam what we would do to them or something like that, you know. So that I thought that's why they must probably try and put up a fight. But yeah, and then we just carried on rolling, and we get to the Basra Road, and just then that's when we was ordered to stop. But we got on the Basra Road just as basically it being blitzed up and down. I don't know if you know from Kuwait all the way up to Baghdad, up into Iraq and through Basra. There's a 6-lane highway, and what happened was all the Iraqis were trying to just get away from Kuwait, and they just robbed lots of civilian vehicles and everything, and they're just driving up the Basra Road, and they had the heavy weapons and the military vehicles and civilian vehicles, which were full of Iraqis, and they were just all trying to get flee. And the coalition just went up and down the road and blitzed them. So we stopped there, and literally the vehicles were still on fire, and it was like some film or horror scene. But then we were just told to wait there completely, and we was all confused. We had no idea that the war had ended. And then a day later, it was saying, right, the war's ended, just stay put. But it was just amazing that the being right on the Basra Road because it was nose to nose vehicles which have just were on fire, a lot of them completely gutted, but some had been shot up, but they never caught fire because I went on this coach and it'd been shot up and it's just all dead Iraqis in there in the in uniform, and also they had all baby clothes and stuff like this, as if they've robbed baby shops and everything, and they must have just robbed shops because some of them had civilian cars as well, so they must have robbed the cars and inside them cars they've obviously looted and just tried to get away. But it's just weird. It was like it was like some sort of a horrific horror movie. The scene because we was told stay completely put because the coalition had also dropped a lot of anti-personnel mines for catch Iraqis out, but we was in the middle of it, so we were just hanging about waiting. It took 3 days before the engineers come up with the bulldozers to start moving all the bodies and body parts. But it was just really weird, you know, because obviously the smell of death and it was all fresh and it was just lots and lots of bodies and dogs walking around with parts of human parts on in the mouths, and it was to this day that was just one scene you couldn't Steven Spielberg or whatever and an horror movie couldn't make up. It was really really weird, especially the night, you know, you were just there for a few days and then till the engineers come and started clearing up all the debris and all the bodies and stuff. So that was it then, and then we was told it's over. And we're like, what's going on? And basically that was it. We moved back to Germany.
There's so that I knew that highway existed. I did not know that is what happened. I knew that they'd hammered guys going back. That's crazy. And it's funny you bring up the anti-personnel mine. I was watching a documentary about British jets that had bombed in the opening days of the Gulf War, and they had some kind of ordinance where it would hit a bomb and then they would drop all these anti-personnel mines on the runway so that when the Rockies would try to come and immediately pace the runway back up, the mines would make that very difficult to do. I always thought that was very cool. I forget what the name of the bomb system was, but I always thought that was a very cool weapon design that you bomb the runways and then they drop all these mines over it and make it so that they couldn't just pave back over it. But on the SAS point,